She stocked shelves at the 24-hour Walmart on the edge of Fort Bragg. Night shift, quiet, invisible. The young soldiers buying tactical gear barely looked at her, and when they did, it was with amusement or pity. Just another middle-aged woman in a blue vest, pushing a cart full of energy drinks and protein bars. But when one recruit reached for a box on the top shelf and noticed the faded ink on her forearm, everything stopped. Because that mark wasn't from a tattoo parlor, it was from a place where only ghosts survive. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we begin this story of silence, survival, and the legends we never see coming, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe some heroes hide in plain sight, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who chose to disappear. The Walmart sat at the intersection of Bragg Boulevard and All-American Freeway, a 24-hour fortress of fluorescent lights and endless aisles serving the soldiers of Fort Bragg. At any hour, you could find off-duty personnel buying supplies before deployments, energy drinks for late-night duty shifts, or camping gear that wouldn't drain their paychecks. The store never closed, never slowed, and the night shift workers moved through it like silent machinery, invisible to everyone who mattered. Sarah Vance was one of them. At 38, she wore the blue Walmart vest like armor over a plain gray t-shirt, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that hadn't changed style in 4 years. Her athletic frame was hidden beneath loose-fitting work clothes, and she kept her striking blue eyes focused downward, avoiding contact, avoiding conversation, avoiding everything except the work. She restocked shelves with mechanical precision, spoke only when spoken to, and had perfected the art of being so unremarkable that customers looked right through her. She had worked there for 4 years. Same store, same shift, same routine. Clock in at 2200, restock sporting goods and outdoor recreation until 0600. Clock out, drive home to an empty apartment. No friends, no social media, no trace of who she used to be. Just Sarah Vance, Night Stalker, employee number 47,239. The other workers had stopped trying to befriend her years ago. She's weird, they whispered. 4 years, and I don't know a single thing about her. Sarah never corrected them. Better they think her strange than ask questions she couldn't answer. Better they never learned about the insomnia, the hypervigilance, the way fireworks sent her diving for cover. That Wednesday night in late September started like any other. Sarah rolled her cart through the aisles with practiced efficiency, breaking down cardboard boxes with a box cutter she kept razor sharp, facing products so labels pointed forward, checking inventory on a handheld scanner. The store was quiet, except for the constant hum of industrial refrigeration units and the distant echo of the floor buffer that ran automatically down the main aisles. Her manager, Dennis, barely acknowledged her anymore. She hit her numbers, never caused problem, never asked for anything. Perfect employee. Around 100, she heard them before she saw them. 5 young soldiers, drunk and loud, crashed into the outdoor section. Recent basic training graduates with 82nd Airborne shirts and swagger they hadn't earned. Sarah continued working nearby, her movements automatic, her attention tracking the soldiers. Old habits. "Yo, check this out," the leader said, holding up a tactical vest. "This what Delta wears?" "Man, Delta wouldn't touch Walmart gear," another replied. "This is for Airjot kids." They laughed. Sarah's hands paused briefly before continuing. "Excuse me," the leader called out, his voice carrying an edge of mockery. "Hey, Walmart lady, you know where the good tactical stuff is? The real operator shit, not this garbage." Sarah turned slowly, keeping her expression neutral, her body language non-threatening. Years of training. Not military training, but survival training. The kind you learned when you desperately needed people to underestimate you. "Aisle 14 has additional outdoor and tactical equipment," Sarah replied, her voice quiet and flat, deliberately stripping away any hint of personality. "The hunting section is aisle 16. Additional outdoor equipment," the leader mimicked in a high-pitched voice, grinning at his friends like he had just delivered the world's funniest joke. "Operator grandma over here talking like a robot. You practice that at home?" His friends laughed, feeding off his energy, their eyes bright with alcohol and the cruelty of young men who had never learned consequences. Sarah returned to her work without reaction, her face a mask of professional indifference. But the leader wasn't done. He moved closer, his boots heavy on the polished floor, invading her space with the casual entitlement of someone who had never been made to pay for doing so. "Seriously though, you ever see any real military guys come through here? Like actual door kickers? Not re-MFs buying camping gear." "I don't pay attention to customers," Sarah answered, not looking up from her inventory scanner. "Yeah, I bet you don't pay attention to much," he said, his tone edging from mockery towards something meaner. "Just stocking shelves, collecting that paycheck, going home to your cats. Must be nice. Easy job like this. Not like you're putting your life on the line or anything." One of his friends, slightly older and less drunk, put a hand on the leader's shoulder. "Bro, come on, leave her alone. I'm just making conversation," the leader protested. But but his grin said otherwise. Just wondering if she appreciates what we do, you know? Putting ourselves between her and the bad guys so she can stock shelves in peace. Sarah looked at him directly for the first time, her blue eyes meeting his without expression, without anger, without anything at all. Just a flat, empty gaze that made the soldier take a half step back without understanding why. "You're absolutely right," Sarah said quietly. "Some people serve." She moved to push her cart past him, but the Georgia soldier, trying to prove his own toughness, deliberately stepped into her path. "Hold up, we're not done talking to you." The tension shifted. What had been casual mockery was becoming something else, something with an edge of genuine hostility, the kind of situation that could escalate quickly if someone didn't diffuse it. Sarah stopped, her cart between her and the soldiers, her posture still non-threatening but with a quality that was hard to define. She wasn't afraid, wasn't intimidated, wasn't anything, just waiting. The older friend, the one who had tried to intervene earlier, stepped forward. "Seriously, guys, let's just go. We got what we came for." "Relax, Stevens," the leader said. "We're just having a conversation with Walmart lady here. Maybe educating her a little about what real service looks like." Stevens reached out to pull his friend back, his hand grabbing the leader's shoulder but missing, his balance off from the alcohol. He stumbled sideways, reaching out instinctively to steady himself, and his hand caught Sarah's arm. Not aggressive, not violent, just a drunk man catching himself, but the contact pulled her sleeve up, exposing her forearm in the harsh fluorescent light. Stevens froze, his hand still on her arm, his eyes locked on the faded tattoo visible on her skin. It wasn't decorative, wasn't artistic, wasn't anything a civilian would recognize, but Stevens, son of a Marine Corps veteran, recognized exactly what he was looking at. A series of numbers, 8 digits that looked like a date but weren't. Below them, 2 letters and a symbol so small it was barely visible. And beneath that, a set of coordinates, faded but unmistakable. "Holy shit," Stevens whispered, his hand dropping away from her arm like he had touched a live wire. The laughter died. The group went quiet, their attention shifting to Stevens, to his expression, to whatever had just happened. "What?" the leader demanded, irritated at losing his audience. "That ink," Stevens said, his voice completely different now, stripped of all mockery. "That's, Jesus Christ, that's JSOC marking." The word hung in the air like a grenade someone had just pulled the pin from. Joint Special Operations Command, the organization that controlled Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, and other units so classified most soldiers would never know their names. Sarah pulled her sleeve down calmly, her face showing nothing, and returned to her cart. "Bullshit," the leader said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "You're telling me she's what, some kind of operator? Look at her. She stocks shelves at Walmart." "I'm looking at that ink," Stevens replied, his tone carrying absolute conviction. "My dad had something similar from his time in MARSOC. That's not something you get at a tattoo shop. Those are grid coordinates. That date format is military classification coding, and that symbol, He trailed off, staring at Sarah like he was seeing a ghost. The soldiers looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. The way she stood, perfectly balanced, weight distributed, ready to move in any direction. The way her eyes had tracked all 5 of them simultaneously when they first approached. Threat assessment as natural as breathing. The way she moved with absolute economy, no wasted motion, every gesture purposeful. "Ma'am," Stevens said, his entire demeanor transformed, speaking now with genuine respect. "Can I ask where you served?" Sarah continued, breaking down a cardboard box, her hands steady, her voice level. "I didn't serve. That ink says different, ma'am." "A lot of things say different things," Sarah replied, her tone flat. "Doesn't make them true." But the leader, sobered by his friend's reaction and embarrassed by the shift in power, had pulled out his phone. He was searching something, his thumb moving rapidly across the screen, his expression changing as he read. "Female Delta operators," he said slowly, reading from whatever article he had found. "Started in 2010. Cultural support teams, then full integration into combat roles. Most names are still classified, but..." He scrolled, his face going pale. "There was one. They called her Phantom. Afghanistan, 2012 to 2016. Sarah's hands stopped moving. Just for a second, every muscle in her body went rigid, a tell so small and so brief that only Stevens, watching her intently, noticed it. "Says here," the leader continued, his voice quieter now, reading with the kind of focus that came from realizing you might have made a terrible mistake, "that Phantom was one of the most effective snipers in the unit. Confirmed kills classified, but intelligence reports suggest over 40 high-value targets. She operated mostly alone, could stay in position for days, survive on almost nothing. They called her Phantom because targets never saw her coming and friendlies never saw her leave. The store seemed to hold its breath. The refrigeration units hummed. Somewhere in the distance, the automatic floor buffer continued its endless rounds. The article says she was part of an operation in 2016 that went wrong, the leader continued, unable to stop himself now. Her team was compromised, ambushed in the mountains near the Pakistan border. Only 3 men made it out. The 4th team member, the sniper, was listed as KIA, but her body was never recovered. They assumed she was taken or died in the fighting. He looked up at Sarah, and for the first time, he saw past the blue vest, past the tired expression, past everything she had built to hide behind. That operator's name, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, was Sarah Vance. The silence stretched. Stevens stood frozen, staring at Sarah like she was a myth made real. The other soldiers had gone completely still. Their earlier drunk confidence evaporated, replaced by something like fear. "You should leave," Sarah said quietly, not turning around, her hands resuming their work on the cardboard box like nothing had happened. "Ma'am," Stevens tried, his voice respectful but insistent. "If you're really, you should leave," Sarah repeated. And this time her voice carried a quality that made all 5 soldiers take an instinctive step backward. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was the voice of someone who had given orders in situations where hesitation meant death, where tone and authority were the difference between life and dying alone in the mountains. They left. Quickly, quietly, without another word. Sarah stood in the empty aisle for a long moment, staring at the box cutter in her hand. Her fingers were steady, no tremor, no visible reaction. But inside, behind the wall she had built, something had cracked. 4 years of hiding, of being invisible, of pretending she was someone else. Shattered by a drunk kid with a smartphone and her own carelessness, she returned to work, breaking down boxes, facing products, checking inventory. The routine that kept her sane, that filled the hours, that kept the memories at bay. 15 minutes later, she felt him before she saw him. The change in the air, the particular way someone moved when they had spent years learning to walk silently. Sarah turned slowly, her body tensing, old instincts flooding back. A man stood at the end of the aisle, late 40s, gray hair cut military short, wearing civilian clothes that were just slightly too tactical to be random. He moved with the same economy Sarah possessed, and his eyes had the same quality hers did, the look of someone who had seen things that changed them forever. "Vance," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of command, even though he wore no uniform. Sarah studied him for a moment before recognition clicked. "Colonel Rivera, you're retired." "So are you," Rivera replied, moving closer but maintaining respectful distance. "Supposedly, I am retired." Funny definition of retired. Working night shift at Walmart. Rivera's tone wasn't mocking, wasn't judgmental, just stating facts. "I got a call 20 minutes ago from base security. Seems some young soldiers posted about a female Walmart employee with JSOC Inc. Posted enough details that people started making connections. My file is sealed. Your file is classified KIA," Rivera corrected, "which means eventually someone's going to dig deep enough and find out you're very much alive. And then questions get asked. Questions about why a decorated operator faked her death. Questions about where you've been for 4 years. Questions you don't want to answer." Sarah said nothing, her jaw tight. Rivera moved closer, his voice dropping lower. "What happened in those mountains wasn't your fault, Sarah. You held that position for 6 hours, alone, against 40 hostiles. You killed 17 of them. You gave Martinez, Collins, and Thompson time to reach the extraction point. You saved their lives." "I couldn't save Bennett," Sarah said, her voice flat, but with an undertone of something raw beneath the surface. "Bennett was dead before the ambush started," Rivera replied. "Sniper round to the neck. He bled out in seconds. There was nothing you could have done. I should have seen it coming. Should have spotted the shooter. Should have what?" Rivera cut her off. "Been psychic? That operation was fucked from the start. Bad intel, compromised position, insufficient support. You did everything right, Vance. Everything. And you still blame yourself because that's what operators like you do. You carry every failure, every loss, every person you couldn't save." Sarah turned away, her hands gripping the edge of her cart so hard her knuckles went white. "You disappeared because you needed to," Rivera continued, his tone gentler now. "I understand that. PTSD, survivor's guilt, the whole cocktail of shit that comes from doing what we did for as long as we did it. But hiding in a Walmart, stocking shelves, pretending you're not Sarah Vance, that's not recovery, Sarah. That's just slow suicide." "I'm alive," Sarah said quietly. That's more than Bennett got. Are you? Rivera's question hung in the air. Because the Sarah Vance I knew was alive. She had fire, had purpose, had something to fight for. This? He gestured at the Walmart vest, the cart, the endless aisles. This isn't living. This is just existing. He pulled something from his pocket and placed it on the shelf between them. A challenge coin, worn and scratched from years of being carried. Sarah recognized it immediately. Delta Force insignia on one side. On the other, engraved coordinates. The exact coordinates of the ambush. The place where everything had ended. The unit still remembers, Rivera said quietly. Martinez is a civilian contractor now, training security personnel in Virginia. Collins teaches at the Special Warfare School. Thompson's with the agency, doing what he does. But they all remember. They all talk about the operator who gave them a chance to live. Sarah stared at the coin, but didn't touch it. There's a ceremony next month, Rivera continued. Fort Bragg. They're finally declassifying some of the operations from that period. Acknowledging operators, honoring sacrifices. Your name's on the list, Vance. They want to recognize what you did, what you gave. No, you don't have to accept attention. You don't have to give speeches or shake hands or any of that. But maybe, just maybe, you should let yourself remember that you weren't just a soldier. You were one of the best operators this country ever produced. And walking away, hiding, pretending to be someone else, it doesn't erase that. It just means you're carrying it alone. Rivera left the coin on the shelf and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the empty store until they faded completely. Sarah stood there for a long time, staring at the worn metal. The coordinates engraved on its surface were burned into her memory. Didn't need the reminder. She could close her eyes and see that mountainside, feel the cold bite of altitude, smell the cordite and blood. She picked up the coin slowly, feeling its weight, heavier than it should be, heavier than any metal had a right to be. The next morning, as Sarah clocked out at 600, her manager Dennis stopped her by the time clock. Hey Vance, some guys in suits were here last night asking about you. Said they were from base security, needed to verify some information. I didn't tell them shit, but they seemed real interested in you. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Once the story started spreading online, once people started making connections, it was only a matter of time before official channels got involved. She drove home to her apartment in silence, the challenge coin sitting in her cup holder, occasionally catching the early morning sunlight. Her apartment was sparse. A mattress on the floor, no frame. A card table with 2 folding chairs. A television that barely worked. No pictures on the walls. No personal item. Nothing that suggested anyone actually lived there. Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at herself. Really looking, for the first time in years. The woman staring back was 38 but looked older. Lines around her eyes from squinting in the sun, from nights without sleep, from carrying weight that never got lighter. She pulled up her sleeve, looking at the tattoo that had given her away. The numbers represented her unit designation, classified information that shouldn't exist on anyone's skin. The coordinates were from her first confirmed kill, a Taliban commander who had been planning an attack on a girls' school. The small symbol between them was something only operators would recognize. Now that Mark had ended her anonymity, had blown apart the careful invisibility she had built, and part of her, a part she didn't want to examine too closely, felt relieved. Over the next week, the story spread through Fort Bragg like wildfire. Phantom Lives headlines screamed. Reporters appeared at Walmart. Other operators came just to see if it was real. Dennis pulled her aside. This attention is causing problems. Maybe this isn't the right place for you anymore. Sarah knew he was right. The hiding was over. She called Rivera's number. 3 days later, Sarah met Martinez, Collins, and Thompson at a coffee shop near Fort Bragg. She wore clothes that fit properly for the first time in years. Martinez grinned when he saw her. Phantom. Holy shit, it's really you. They talked for 2 hours about the mountains, about what came after, about survival and guilt. The men didn't judge, just listened. The ceremony is next week, Martinez finally said. You should be there. Bennett would want you there. The ceremony took place on a crisp October morning at Fort Bragg. No press, no cameras, just military personnel and families. 5 names were read. 5 operators finally acknowledged for actions taken in operations that officially never happened. Sarah sat in the back row. When her name was called, when they read Sergeant First Class Sarah Vance, Delta Force, she stood and walked to the front with quiet confidence. The citation was brief. Extraordinary heroism, actions above and beyond, saved 3 American lives at great personal risk. After the ceremony, younger operators approached her, wanting to understand what it meant to be a real operator. Sarah didn't hide, didn't deflect. For the first time in 4 years, she allowed herself to be seen. That afternoon, she drove to Arlington National Cemetery, to Section 60, where Bennett's marker stood. She placed the challenge coin on his grave. I made it out, she said quietly. Finally. 2 weeks later, Sarah gave her notice at Walmart. On her last day, the same soldiers returned. The leader held a wrapped package package. "Ma'am, we wanted to apologize and thank you." Inside was a framed photo from the ceremony. "We're deploying to Afghanistan next month," he continued. "Knowing operators like you existed makes us want to be better. Don't try to be heroes," Sarah said quietly. "Just do your job, watch your team, and come home." Stevens turned back. "What made you finally stop hiding?" Sarah thought about Rivera, about her team, about the slow realization that surviving wasn't living. "I didn't come back," she said. "I was always here. I just stopped pretending I wasn't." Sarah started training security contractors. The pay was better, the work meaningful. She bought a small house, got a dog named Bennett, started sleeping more than 3 hours a night. Some nights were still bad, but other nights she slept through until dawn. She wasn't healed, wasn't the same person she'd been before Afghanistan, but she was Sarah Vance again, not hiding, not invisible, not slowly dying, and that was enough. Have you ever met someone who turned out to be more than they seemed? Share their story in the comments. Sometimes the strongest people are those who choose silence over recognition, who serve without needing applause, who carry their past quietly until the moment comes to stand and be counted. Subscribe to Secrets Never Told for more stories of hidden heroes and quiet courage.